What's going on, everybody? It's Nick Payne with Facemask Fantasy, and before I begin, just a quick plug. We will continue to host live streams on our channel even during the off-season. Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, we will happily discuss dynasty conversations or any other general topics you may be interested in, and we will, of course, share any additional off-season plans as they come up. So stay tuned. Now, for today's topic, I'll be highlighting some news and notes for each playoff matchup for the duration of the NFL playoffs in the event you plan to play any NFL playoff challenges. I don't consider myself a DFS expert, so to speak, but here for some talking points that'll maybe help you set your lineups again if you choose to play those contests. Up first is the first game on the slate, when the Las Vegas Raiders travel to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals in the inaugural matchup of Super Wild Card Weekend. The Bengals are AFC North champions after clinching the division in Week 17, and they opted to rest starters the last week of the season. The Raiders needed a thrilling overtime game against the Chargers in Week 18 to clinch a playoff spot, but they got it done despite blowing a 15-point lead in the second half of that game. The first question that comes to my mind based on these circumstances is if the Raiders are primed for a bit of a letdown despite it being a playoff game. It took Vegas 70 minutes to outlast a division rival in an emotional game. And while the Raiders are clearly a resilient group given what they've endured this season, they're going to have to dig deep to beat a dangerous Bengals team on the road. At quarterback, both defenses have been middle of the pack as far as fantasy points against, so the matchup is decent but not exactly outstanding for both Joe Burrow and Derek Carr. Burrow is going to be one of the more expensive quarterback options for daily lineups this weekend. He should be somewhat safe at home with his fantastic weapons, but in his first career playoff game, it might be smart to opt for a cheaper alternative. Carr might prove to be that decent alternative, especially if you expect game script to favor the Raiders having to throw the ball. His supporting cast isn't as strong as Cincinnati's, even with the return of Darren Waller, but this game has a high over-under of 49.5, so points are expected to be scored. Carr is an intriguing contrarian play at quarterback. At running back, Josh Jacobs was a solid RB2 on the season and gets a Bengals defense that is giving up 25 fantasy points per game to backs over the past 4 weeks. For the season, Cincinnati is top 12, so it's a plus matchup for Jacobs no matter what numbers you look at. The issue here is game script. The Bengals are 6-point favorites at home, and Jacobs' production has more often than not been tied to whether the Raiders are winning or trailing in the game. When the Raiders are winning, Jacobs can be counted on. When they're trailing, he can't be counted on. Simple as that. The Raiders should lean on one of their better players in a win-or-go-home game, but the only way you can add Jacobs to daily lineups is if you expect Vegas to be playing with a lead. They're playing a young, inexperienced Bengals team, so it's possible, but the Raiders themselves are in the playoffs for just the second time since 2002, so they're not exactly battle-hardened. Jacobs is a volatile option this week who very likely needs a touchdown, maybe 2, to be worth the investment. His backup, Peyton Barber, would be the contrarian play who could get involved in the passing game if Vegas is trailing, but his floor is 0. On the other side, Joe Mixon is coming off a season where he was a top 3 running back in standard and half PPR scoring, and he was the RB4 in PPR scoring. Basically, he was a clear RB1 this year. He's probably the best back playing on Wild Card Weekend, and game script should be in his favor. Not to mention the matchup is great by the numbers. The Raiders have been better recently against opposing running backs, but on the season, they give up top 5 fantasy production. Mixon is going to have to deliver a big performance for his price in daily to hit, but the situation is in his favor to do so. If you want to spend high on somebody, Mixon makes sense. Samaje Perine could mix in for a few touches, but he only topped 50 rushing yards twice this year and has just 1 touchdown. He can't be confidently fired up, but his salary for daily lineup should be dirt cheap if you're looking for a contrarian running back play. At wide receiver, this matchup is not a good one for either side by the numbers. Both Vegas and Cincinnati give up bottom third fantasy production to opposing wideouts the past 4 weeks, but Vegas has been stingier over the course of the season. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are both tantalizing options, especially if you're betting on stacking one or both with Joe Burrow. It's likely, though, that only one of these two delivers a performance that works out for daily lineups relative to cost. Chase is the safer bet, but he's going to be one of the most expensive players on the slate after a 50-point outburst in Week 17. Having to likely choose between Chase and Higgins for a daily lineup means I'd probably prefer to look elsewhere at wide receiver to avoid getting the call wrong. And you could possibly even look right on the other side of this matchup. Hunter Renfrow just polished off an unexpected but brilliant wide receiver one season. And while the Bengals defense have been better against wide receivers recently, they're middle of the pack for the season by the numbers. The matchup isn't too bad, and the expectation is the Raiders will have to throw in this game to keep pace. Expect Renfrow to be heavily involved in the game plan, and he would be someone I'm very much interested in getting into daily lineups this weekend. Finally, at tight end, Darren Waller returned for Vegas in Week 18, playing for the first time since Thanksgiving. He led the team in targets with 9, but he caught just 2 passes. Still, good for him to get a game under his belt before the biggest game of the Raiders season. Waller should be cheaper than the likes of Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and Rob Gronkowski if you want an upper echelon option at tight end. There's more risk, but there's obvious upside. Not to mention the Bengals are giving up tons of points to opposing tight ends the past 4 weeks. Like Renfrow, expect Waller to be heavily involved, and he's a fine play by me this weekend as what should be the 4th most expensive tight end. CJ Uzomah for the Bengals is an option if you choose to punt at the position, as he's delivered 4 catches in 3 of his last 4 games. He pretty much just needs a touchdown to deliver a contrarian tight end play. The problem is that hasn't happened for Uzomah since Week 7. He's a low-end, unexciting option, propped up by the matchup, again, that has an over-under of 49.5 points. This should be one of the more exciting games on the slate this weekend as far as points scored. There's the Cincinnati-Las Vegas breakdown. What are your thoughts? Put any you have in the comment section below, and we can have a conversation about this. Till then, this is Nick Payne with Facemask Fantasy, continuing to produce fantasy content during the offseason. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening.